So in his budget debate presentation, opposition leader Peter Phillips requested that the government reform the current labour laws addressing contract work. So should contract workers get full-time benefits? Let's talk it out with the president of the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, Helene Davis-White. I won't tell you what I call her before that. But good morning, welcome.
Morning.
This is not just about government workers we're talking, it's right across the board.
Right across both public and private sector.
So you agree that there should not be contract workers, or are you saying that even if there's a contract worker, they should have I don't know, the same benefits as a full-time worker? What are we talking about exactly?
Well, it's two things, because we believe, and I think the law supports us, that where a person is employed on contract, it should be in a situation where the job is not of a full-time nature. And so in that situation, the person is employed on what is called a fixed-term contract. And in that situation where persons are employed on fixed-term contracts, then it should not be a rolling contract. What we have now are persons who are employed on fixed-term contracts, and at the expiration of the term, the contract is either renewed or terminated. But you have renewals that go on for 20 years.
Okay. Who should determine whether it is a full-time job or a contract job? Who determines that, or what determines that?
But when one looks at any place of business and the work that is to be carried out, then you would be able to determine the number of workers, employees that you need at any point in time to be able to carry out those functions.
Let me jump in. Let's be specific. Let's look at government workers. Give me an idea of someone who you think is on contract that should not be on contract.
Well, we have, certainly in my union, what has now become a proliferation of contract employment in the health sector.
Okay.
Where we have patient care assistants who are employed on yearly renewable contracts. I have a case with one who is employed like for 15 years. Several of them who are employed like for 15 years on these renewable contracts. What we are saying is that in that situation where you have somebody employed for 15 years and you really have not actually broken their service, then that's is clearly a full-time job.
All right, so let's go to the next side of the coin now. What if they're on contract and, as you said, 15 years? But they don't get these benefits. They're not getting pension. They're not getting stuff, right? Isn't that one of the part of the argument?
That's part of the difficulty. One of the things is that this whole thing about contract employment came up in a situation where a lot of employers felt that they didn't want to take on some of the costs that are associated with full-time employment. So, you know, if you are employed full-time and you have deductions for national insurance, housing trust, these have an employer component to it. But if it is that I employ you on contract, I can argue that you are in fact self-employed, so to speak.
Right.
And so you
don't have to pay these
and so
benefits.
The employer doesn't have to pay. But in many instances, contracts do have situations where the person who is employed on contract have virtually the same benefits as the individual full-time worker. And we are saying that if it is necessary to employ somebody on contract for a fixed term, then you, in the same breath, you should be able to have that individual retain some of the benefits that a full-time employee would have.
I started by saying that the opposition leader wanted this, what you're agreeing with. The Jamaica Employees Federation president, he does not agree with
the Employers
Federation does not agree. Mr. Wan doesn't agree with all of that. Should it not be left up to the company who you work with to decide whether I want you?
In a sense, probably yes, but you have to look down the road, because all of these persons who are employed on contract and who don't have benefits that the employer assists in providing, it actually comes back to the state and the taxpayer. So I am employed I'm employed on contract, and I don't have pension, as an example. When time comes for retirement, it comes back to, if I'm unable to take care of myself, it comes back to the taxpayer through social security benefits and so on. That is really paid for by the taxpayer. We have situations in some of our infirmaries where you have persons who were employed for their entire working life. When they retire, because they have no pensions and the NIS pension is unable to suffice, they end up in what some people call a poorhouse.
So what exactly are you asking? And does this have to go through Parliament for this to be changed? Can Parliament look at, say, RJ Green and say, well, yeah, even if
one of the things that we are looking at in the Confederation is employment law that takes into account all areas and all types of employment. And in that context, rather than it just being under the Labor Relations and Industrial Disputes Act, that we should have employment law that looks at all the things that will happen during employment. So disputes and collective bargaining issues are one thing, but we also have things like termination and engagement of workers, what are minimum benefits that should apply. Those are the kinds of things that we would want in employment law. And
finally, where are you with all of that? Are you seeing a light at the end of the tunnel? Or?
Well, one of the things that has happened recently is that the JCTU made a submission and a presentation to the National Partnership Council on this very issue of contract employment. And there's an agreement that a small working group will sit and sort of distill all of the issues, and from there we will deal with it through the Labour Advisory Council in terms of trying to make these kinds of changes.
All right, thanks for coming. Good to see you.
No problem.
All right, President of Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, Helene Davis White. More on Smile when we come back. Stay with us, please. Soon come.